So when I started Oculus, I posted a manifesto on what I believed Oculus would be doing. I wrote a blog post about my affinity for this technology, generally on the blog of palmerluckey.com. It's palmerluckey.com, the #1 Palmer Luckey blog on the internet. And I had a good quote, which was from the first about page text for oculusvr.com that I posted in early 2012. And I said, I am a huge HMD, that's head-mounted display. I am a huge HMD nut. As far as I know, I have the largest private collection of unique HMDs in the world, totaling 43 units, not including the ones I've built myself. Part of this HMD obsession, as with any other obsession, is trying to convince other people to join in. And what a seductive dream that technology can transport us into worlds we cannot hope to experience in real life, or augment our reality to shape it closer to our desires. Unfortunately, virtual reality has risen and fallen many times, with a lot more emphasis on the latter portion. The tech has never gotten far enough to be truly convincing, and great VR hardware has been out of reach for the average person, until now. Oculus is my tilt at trying to change that. The tech has improved, and we can build hardware and software that is better, stronger, and faster than the old guard. Companies that create niche, wildly expensive products. Don't get me wrong, these companies are important, and they have to solve some very tough engineering challenges to satisfy their customers. But the reality is that as gamers and dreamers, we have a different set of challenges to meet. Massive field of view to engulf your visual senses. Low latency tracking to maximize presence. Lightweight and comfortable for long-term use, and perhaps most importantly, prices measured in the hundreds of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars. I've worked long and hard with a lot of brilliant people to try and meet these challenges, and it's now time to put it to the test. Why the name Oculus? It is a Latin word for eye. Someone used the word in a meeting several months ago. I thought it was a nifty word. And there you have it. And I wrote that, I guess that would have been almost 14 years ago now. Yeah. And I still feel the same way. I mean, what a seductive vision to experience things you could never experience, to augment our view of the world with information that we could never perceive naturally. It's just, it still speaks to me. So you're right. This is my favorite thing. I can't help it. I'm sorry to the Anduril teams that are working on non-AR VR stuff. You have to cut me a little bit of slack. Sometimes your first love sticks with you.
No, but like to the extent that you're, again, I don't want this to sound overly fluffy or something, but to the extent that you're Tony Stark, I mean, I could totally see this being your core mission. I mean, it feels like you were.
Hey, even Tony Stark liked augmented reality.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's actually interesting how much overlap there is there, because the vision of the thing, it wasn't just the suit, right? It was also the augmented vision paired with this kind of AI guardian angel in the form of Jarvis. That is what we are building with Eagle Eye. Eagle Eye has an onboard AI guardian angel, maybe less in the style of Jarvis and more in the vein of Cortana from Halo. But this idea of having this ever-present companion who can operate systems, who can communicate with others, that you can offload tasks onto, that is looking out for you with more eyes than you could ever look out for yourself, right there in your helmet, that is such a powerful thing to make real.
So, and when I wrote a story about the IVAS deal, I think, in my opinion, it was the only accurate story on how to read how this deal shook out. But
I agreed. I read the piece. Well, it's because you actually, I think, understood what was going on, and a lot of a B reporter, just like working the government contract space, they look and they're like, "Oh, Anduril novated this contract from Microsoft. Interesting." And you have to have a pretty deep understanding of the tech industry. Me, Anduril, Microsoft, HoloLens, IVAS. There's a lot of synthesis that needs to happen to understand it.
If there's $20 billion that moves from one pie to another, there's usually a good story behind there.
It's I hadn't fully thought about it this way, but just touching on that point.
Yeah,
it is pretty fascinating that you have a tech company win a $20 billion contract, and it got way less attention than, there's startups that will raise $15 million and get more attention than that $22 billion contract.
It's a big deal.
Anduril got way more, we'll raise $500 million and get literally an order of magnitude more press coverage than this $22 billion contract.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
I don't know if it's because,
I'll tell you this. The party that I had after novating the IVAS contract was a lot bigger than the party I had after raising my last round of money from investors. But I think it's not commensurately covered by the press.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I was thinking back to some of the comments that were left under the story. I'm sure this is not new to you, but even people who I think are maybe tech enthusiasts, they still see this vision, and you get this comment a lot of like, okay, it's great if you can build this thing. It's going to be too much technology thrown at the soldier. This is actually like it never will work. This is like a cool thing we see in movies. I can see some use for it, but it's actually hinders the soldiers more than helps, and will never work.
I think that they don't have the right vision. Literally. A lot of people imagine that when you're going to do something like thermal vision and night vision and ultraviolet vision and quasi X-ray vision informed by swarms of drone building a real-time 3D model, they imagine that you're like a techno operator who's typing on the keyboard as fast as he can, managing a dozen different streams. They're also used to things like video games, which are designed for the human to be the pacing factor for what you can do. In the real world, that's not how you design military tools. You design them ideally to be transparent and invisible to the user and just seamlessly enhance their abilities. And that's what we're doing with Eagle Eye. We're building a helmet that just makes you better at the things you want to do. Like people say, oh, but you really want to have all this shit on the soldier? Isn't it going to be too complicated to have heat vision, night vision? Okay.
Heavy, hot.
Look, and of course, hot and heavy. Yeah, you have to make it light. You have to make it neutral. You have to make it balanced. But like, in terms of the complexity, like, do you think Superman deals with complexity when he looks out at the world and has heat vision and X-ray? No, he's just Superman. He just perceives what he needs to perceive, and he just sees the world that way. You just have to design user interfaces that way. You shouldn't be toggling between 10 different sensor menus. You should just see a seamless view that is built by kind of an AI interpolator that looks out into the world and says, okay, well, I know he probably wants to see all of the hot human signatures. I know he probably wants to see all the drones. I probably know. You can build technology that is transparent to the user. The reason that people, I think, are so cynical is because people often don't meet the bar. There's so many things that are shit. And so I think everything must be shit. And I just don't think that. I know because I've been using Eagle Eye prototypes. And I know maybe I'm not the guy to argue that the tech is easy to use because I'm a hardcore techno head from birth and I can operate wacky stuff. But you could put on a normal person, they can look out into the world and do things and see things with zero training that they never would have been able to do otherwise. I'm not concerned about information overload because I'm competent.
Even I'm sure people would look at Apple's headset and say, well, look, if the world's biggest consumer electronics company with all the money at its disposal and technology, how much better you could see limitations still in this technology that
I think it's gonna be way easier. I have an easier job than Apple does. They have to make an entertainment device, and that's not just about how easy it is to use, because you want military tools to be easy to use. I'll give you a specific example. Apple has to have extremely high image quality at all times, including through their pass-through, including when you're turning your head. That means that they need to come up with exposure settings that don't create too much noise and grain in the image. I don't have to do that. I'm a tool. I'm a tool for seeing better. I can crank up the gain on my sensors and see things that, if I were to do the same thing on an Apple product, people would say, oh my God, the sensor feed is so grainy. I'm not trying to build something that's visually appealing. I'm trying to build a functional tool. Here's another example. Apple has to have a fixed persistence level so they can have constant brightness across all scenes, across all types of head motion. I can say, you know what? I'm going to ramp my persistence down and my brightness level commensurately down during fast head rotations so that I have high motion clarity rather than having blur when I turn my head very quickly. Because it's a tool, and it's okay if the image gets darker briefly as I'm whipping my head to the side and then ramps back up to full brightness as soon as I stop moving. That's something I can do with Eagle Eye. If Apple did that, they'd be pilloried by people. They'd say, this is bizarre. The brightness level is changing as I look around. The image is grainy when I look at certain things. I would actually say building a tool gives you a very different level of constraints than building something that needs to preserve kind of this idealized model of what people think a screen should look like, how a movie viewed through a screen should look like. And so my job is a lot easier than Apple. I'll give you one last example. One of the things we're doing at Eagle Eye is using multiple microdisplays per eye with a tiled seam. And so you end up with this small little kind of distorted seam that's living out in your peripheral view, and you can see it really easily. I mean, it's there. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't make you sick, but it's definitely there. Apple can't make something like that. They can't make a thing where it's a seamless magical experience, except for this weird distorted bubble seam down both sides of your vision in your periphery. But for a tool, you can do that. It's not actually a problem. And so I agree. Apple has a hard challenge. They have to make something for everybody. I have to make a thing that keeps people alive. And I think I think my job's easier than Apple's.
Where will these be produced?
In the United States. So our current manufacturing plan gets us to full rate production in the United States with no Chinese parts, no PRC dependency. And there are a lot of challenges in doing that, but it's one that I've done before. Anduril has had to do this for our other products. We've talked a little bit about this, but I'm pretty allergic to all these debates about how it's impossible to make stuff in the United States. You probably have seen the stories about how iPhones would cost $30,000 if they made here. It's all bullshit. I know because I make stuff in the United States. The people who are saying that it will cost 100 times more are saying that because they want to make excuses for what they're doing. They want to excuse why they're in China. Look, I get it. It's hard to make stuff in the United States. It's hard to make high-tech stuff. It's really hard to make these types of integrated electronics products. But it's not 100 times harder. It's not even 10 times harder. The Mod Retro Chromatic. It's made entirely in North America. Isn't that cool? And that's a $199 Game Boy clone with extraordinarily high quality. It's not like this is a $1 million military piece of hardware. Even the Mod Retro Chromatic is a consumer product, and I don't need China to make it. So I often encourage people to be a little more realistic and realize, yes, you'll take a hit making stuff in the US. Yes, you will. There are certain things you won't be able to do, but it's not this impossibility that people pretend that it is.
And it's on Anduril to manufacture these, or it's a...
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So Meta is a technology partner. They're teamed up with us. But in this case, Anduril is the prime on the contract. We're the ones owning the development, the integration, and we're responsible at the end of the day. If this doesn't work, it's Anduril skinning our knees